I'm Bruce Greenberg. I'm the founder of iCinema Ventures. The reason why I'm here and I can get up and talk to all these wonderful people is because in the last couple of years after launching the 4DX Theater at LA Live, if any of you have been there, that's an immersive environment to watch a movie, and being involved with CJ Corporation out of South Korea, that I recognized that the world was certainly headed into this immersive space. So iCinema Ventures was born out of finding a direct relationship, correlation, and corridor between the technology world, Hollywood, and then the world that actually pays for all these things, which is really sponsorship and advertising. So that's my background and what I do. I'm going to start off with a video piece first, and then I'm going to introduce our panel. So give me just a second to put that on.
Human of all digital communication technology.
Okay.
I'm going to open the door.
Oh my god, that's fucking weird. Hey, what's up? That's cool. Hey. Oh my god. Am I supposed to go down there? Because I don't have legs.
I could see why people would be into this.
This is actually amazing.
VR is amazing. As soon as you put that headset on, you feel like you're in a completely different environment. You forget where you are in the real world. It's so good, and I think that you really have to try it to see what it's like. Nobody can explain it to you, but it's amazing.
If you could have a virtual telecommunication system that allowed you to get, all of your facial expressions, all your body language, to make you feel like you're actually in a room with a group of other people, I think that you would be hard pressed to find a better digital communication.
Oh, cool. Check it out. I nailed the bunny ears. Got that one. That one's pretty good.
Nice bunny
Got it
ears,
down.
yeah.
I don't really like that one as much.
Good.
I don't really like that one either. How about this? Can we get this on Facebook?
Yeah, you can post that directly to your wall. Just drop it in this Facebook post office box.
Right here?
Oh my god. Okay, we're going up. We are going up. Okay. And now we have to shoot targets. We have to shoot targets. And you look to shoot, you look to aim. Oh my god. The person in front of you, his head actually moves. Yeah. Oh, it just turned out. Oh, it's aliens! They're aliens! Oh my god!
It's the evolution instead of it just being the portal in, it's the actual experience itself.
People are really angry over two very high-profile non-indictments.
You're now present in that world instead of watching it from afar.
Amazing!
Welcome to the complex universe inside Ruben's head. Whoa. The crown jewel of the human experience and home to nearly 100 billion neurons communicating through trillions of connections. That's more connections than stars in our galaxy.
Hello guys, I look forward to our 6-month gathering because we really are kind of a mile marker for where the industry is. So much has changed. I mean, just daily. I mean, if I look at, okay, so Facebook announced a spec for a camera yesterday, for a 360 camera yesterday. Last week, Google allowed iframing on websites and mobile for 360 video. I personally think there's a little bit of a split happening between 360 video and immersive VR. So it's really interesting from a storytelling perspective, what will best serve the story. There's been a ton of investment. I'm starting to see some really great content. We work with independent filmmakers, and our Storytech Immersive's job is to work with those filmmakers, embed those independent filmmakers in existing productions and production companies so that capabilities can be onboarded quickly. And I sort of troll the independent VR film festivals. The work is amazing, Bruce. I mean, there's really some great stuff. And even commercial work, I mean, Goosebumps is a blast. I mean, there's just, and every day, like yesterday I sat, because, I'm on my way to NAB this week, and yesterday I sat and basically updated and downloaded new content and spent about 2 hours inside the headset just looking at stuff. Now, there's still a lot of bad VR, and I would hope that people experimenting would really pay attention to quality, but we're getting there. And I still listen to all the naysayers. I read a post yesterday on Medium, VR's a dud, and I thought, clearly this person has not followed the content strain of things. You've got distributors, you've got Vrideo, you've got Little Star, you've got Jaunt, you've got Weaver's Transport. So the industry is rising. I think a lot has changed since we last met.
All right. So that was a little bit from Brian Sethurst, who's been with us before on a number of occasions. I just need to get this PowerPoint back up. I apologize. Okay. So what's interesting this year is we have some additions to our panel, which we're very happy to have. Number one on this panel this year is Allison Wood, who is the principal CEO of Reify. And Allison comes to us. She is an artist, not just a business person, an artist herself. One of the most interesting things for me that I saw from Allison's work is that literally she can give you the opportunity to touch sound in 3D. It's a very amazing, for anyone who loves music, you could have your own piece of artwork of your favorite song. So it's a pretty interesting thing, and I'm sure she might let us know a little more about that. Her company is creating a new platform for augmented reality, and so she's here to really give us a perspective on augmented reality. We haven't had anyone on the team for the 5 year that's been able to do that to any great degree, so we really are happy to have Allison here. Please welcome Allison Wood. Also new to our panel this year is Buzz Hayes. Buzz is really one of the most influential people that I know in the visual arts in the Hollywood community. He's responsible for some of the highest level thinking and influencing in 3D, high frame rate, high resolution. He's worked with every major studio. In the past years, he's been the SVP and executive producer at the 3D group at Sony Pictures, and he now has his own company called True Image, and they're doing some really incredible things as well. Please welcome Buzz Hayes. Third, and someone who I've just met in the last couple of years in VR, and I should have met her earlier, is Janie Fitzgerald. Janie should be called, if Noni de la Pena is known as the godmother of VR, this is the first lady of VR. And how she comes to us really is that Amir Rubin introduced us at SVVR last year. And recently, let me take you back. Like the Lumiere brothers, Janie was responsible for the first 360 videos that were ever shot in the world. Ever shot in the world. So she has that pioneering spirit. She'll give us a little bit of insight into that pioneering spirit. And also, recently, she was asked by Mattel to be responsible for putting together most, if not all, of the material for their Destinations app for the new Viewmaster headset. Please welcome Janie Fitzgerald. My friend and colleague Ed Lance is back with us again. I want to call him Doctor. I mean, this is the doctor of 360, you know. And if 360 now is like a new thing, he's been doing it forever, you know. So again, another pioneer in this business. Ed is the president and CTO, I should say, of Vortex Immersion Studios and media, I should say. And Ed comes to us with both the ability to speak as a NASA engineer as much as he can speak as a creative. Please welcome Ed Lance. My friend Matt List is one of these guys who every time I see him, I always want to smile. He's now looking at his own picture to make sure I actually did what I said I would do, which is change the information on his slide. Because when Matt and I met years ago, he was involved in 3D, which is one of the areas I was involved in as well. But Matt has since gone on to really embrace the world of VR and AR, and most recently for Survios in terms of their VR gaming, as the head of marketing for them. But like Mr. Hayes, Matt is a member of the Advanced Imaging Society, and these are people who have, in their roles as board members, they've had a 30,000-foot view of what's going on, not only in terms of the technology, but the consumer products are going on and the way in which the larger institutions are paying for research and development as well as sales. Please welcome Matt List. And missing from the panel this year, unfortunately, is Randall Kleiser. I do have a piece from him we'll play a little bit later. Randall was unfortunately not able to be here this year because he has to go to represent his new VR experiential series called Defrost. He's making a international PR tour right now on that. Brian, as I said, is not here. And then, of course, Amir Rubin, who has been notorious in this 5-year panel. But I couldn't let him not be here in person, so we actually have a clip from him as well. So right now, though, because these wonderful people are giving us their real time, not their virtual time, I want to make sure that we, can start to get some feedback from them. So let's start with Ed with regards to, we met last fall. In the world of 360, because now you're seeing so much 360 in terms of VR and the way that they're approaching it, what's new and what's pushing the boundaries of the 360 world?
Sure. Well, the big challenge on our side with 360 projection in particular, and also 360 cinema, it's always been on the capture side. In fact, a lot of the pieces that I've produced or directed have been CG for that reason. It's much easier to control a CG environment than being outside with the sunlight, and you can't even hide a grip truck behind you or anything. But the cameras technology has been the big holdup. So I think for me, other than the insurgence of interest into the space, I think the camera developments have been very interesting and promising, and lots of smart people and lots of money going into it.
Awesome. Matt, what about for you?
What's the question?
Sorry. What's new since we last met?
What's new? Since last year, I mean, I've been predominantly focusing a lot on the gaming side, and I've been, I guess I've been thrilled. I think that it's specifically when you look at, touch with Oculus and with HTC Vive. My experience originally in gaming came from the mobile game side, where kind of the method there is that it's a free-to-play where they try to get you in and try to create addictive gameplay where you may not be actually necessarily having a great time, but you just kind of continuously repeat the same behaviors, so they ultimately get you to do it so many times that you monetize. And my experience with virtual reality has been absolutely different. I mean, whether being at Servios, where we had a full-body HTC Vive co-op, which is a multiplayer experience where you'd stand up, you'd actually shoot bow and arrows and wave a laser katana and fight different robots by yourself with a friend, or playing like their football game where you physically would stand there and catch the ball and throw the ball. I had the first time and kind of craving to be back inside them. And it wasn't that I wanted kind of the gameplay mechanic or to be able to go up a level, but I actually just missed the experience. And that's been a real big light bulb for me. Just that virtual reality is just about this feeling and about really feeling, fucking badass. That was my creative briefs where we make you feel badass, and so that to me has been a real eye opener about, just the potential of this business.
Thank you. I want to let you hear a little bit what Amir has to say about this. Let me pull this back here. Sorry.
Phoning it in next time. I didn't know that was
I'm going to again pull it back.
What we expect is the disappointment with Oculus releasing one of the most important consumer electronic device with their CD1 with an Xbox controller. We really needed a consensus on VR experience so developers can clearly know what to develop for. And by HTC Vive coming with full presence and Oculus confusing the community with a very reduced and limited VR experience with an Xbox controller, you realize very quickly not only that the media and the consumers are disappointed and the analysts are disappointed, but you also find it that the developers unfortunately do not have a clear guidance of what is going to be the winning platform, and Oculus being the leading player in this case is really disappointing. Now, with the manufacturing problems, it's possible that the majority, after all, hopefully this year, touch will be shipped, and if that's the case, we will have hopefully the majority of the Oculus owners owning Oculus headsets with the Oculus hand controllers, which will provide also full presence, hopefully, and then we will be in much better shape. But right now, I'm very concerned that the most important piece, which is content for full presence, is taking a kind of a pause, and everyone is waiting to see who is going to win. And obviously, we believe that Vive is going to win with full presence, just like the STEM is enabling, and Oculus is going to catch up now.
So that's what Mir had to say. So we have some idea what's been new. I'm going to go back to the panel here. So the first thing I want to ask is, from the artist perspective, can AR and VR, based on this world that we've now created, exist in a 2D world? Because it seems like all of the work that's coming out, or a great deal of the work that's coming out, is very 2D oriented unless it happens to be done by one of the gaming creative tools. That people are not using, you know, from the old 3D perspective, they're not using stereography as much in those particular, you know, VR experiences. So let's start, you know, first with you, Allison. What is your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think my approach with augmented reality, just across the board always, is that I really believe augmented reality is a new dimension of storytelling. I really look at it as this tissue between our digital and physical world. It's really a way, if you kind of imagine we are living in these parallel universes of our physical reality and our digital reality, and now we finally have this tool and medium to start to bridge those things. You know, I have worked both in gaming engines like Unity to produce content, but I also work in Photoshop producing 2D, you know, GIFs and I would say simpler animations, and starting to work with video. And for me, I think one of the places that augmented reality can really start to shine is we have these huge repositories of digital content, both as artists and brands, and just generally content producers. And how do we actually, before we really worry about producing new AR content, how do we actually start recycling that and attaching it to our physical environment and creating these immersive experiences? So for me, I think there's certainly space for the 2D. I think we need to be thoughtful about where we're implementing it, thinking about what is the user behavior. You know, when you sit down and you go to put an Oculus on, like that's a very, I mean, you have an intention, you know what you're getting into. I think with AR, part of the barrier to entry is not just saying, oh, hold your phone up to a dollar bill. That's not a typical behavior right now. But where we can start to do that is thinking about entertainment, so live performance. I think retail is another really great space to start thinking about where to attach that media.
Makes sense. Janie, I mean, obviously you worked with QuickTime VR to be, you know, the very beginning. That was a 2D product, but were you finding when people were bringing you in to do these, you know, photo sessions with you know, QuickTime VR, that they're saying, wow, I really am missing the third dimension to it, or did it seem to work okay that way?
It never came up. Nobody ever even asked that at the time. For cinematic VR, I like stereoscopic VR, but I know a lot of people that are doing, I am too, doing mono VR, and it's beautiful too. I think that like the real world VR community, it's a very inclusive medium, and like the VR community is very inclusive, and there's definitely room for both. I was talking earlier about this 2D world, and the web is going to go VR, and you'll be in the web, and it'll be in VR. And if I'm reading something, I'm probably going to want it flat. You know, sometimes 3D is too much. This was just a discussion we were talking about earlier, where no, it doesn't have to all be. I mean, what if you're an illustrator, or you want to make something in 2D? Like, I would not limit it. There's so many different kinds of VR. VR is a big word. It's like, what is VR? Is it walking through the mirror? Is it just, it could be anything. When people say VR, that's...
We're going to get into that as well.
Bruce, I think it's it's a great indicator that when HTC looked at the embedded products that they can put on Vive, I mean, right. You know, for years when you got a mobile phone, it was Snake, Pac-Man, and Tetris. And these guys decided to do Tilt Brush, which is, you know, a dynamic 3D creative development tool. You know, fantastic contraption, which is an incredibly immersive 3D exploration tool. And then the Owly game, which is the workplace simulator, which is more of a game. But to your point, they are setting the expectation that this is going to be an incredibly explorative, dynamic 3D experience. So if cinematic people put together a 2D experience, it's going to be a bummer.
Buzz, you've had to kind of straddle the two worlds between the creative people and the money people. And one of the things that happened certainly in the 3D business was we got to a point where they wanted to see more return faster, and they were working in a 2D world, and they were saying, well, let's just convert that to 3D. Do you have any concerns about where we're going? Because obviously, and I'm still in the same world of saying, can we exist in a 2D and 3D world together? I'm asking from a corporate perspective that's backing the technology, because obviously now you've gone from 3D to high frame rate to dynamic range to all these things that are really about visual communication, right? So my question really is, do we have to be concerned that the large corporations that are in charge of the technology, forget about the artistry that's involved here, that they may just say, well, forget it. If you guys don't want to do 3D, we're just going to get rid of 3D and we're just going to do it differently? That's a question.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question. I mean, we ran into so many issues when it came to, let's talk about 3D filmmaking for a minute. Much like VR right now, the majority of the 3D content in its early days was funded by marketing budgets. It was not funded by production budgets. No studio would ever greenlight a 3D picture unless marketing could prove that it was going to bring in more people. And VR is very much in that category right now. And I feel throwing out a little bit of word of caution to companies that are raising tons of money to fund companies that create VR content are asking for a bit of trouble right now, because the real production budgets to do a high quality job are pretty enormous. Now, one of the things that's interesting, you mentioned the idea, I'm a firm believer of 2D and 3D coexisting, stereoscopic and planar content. While at Sony, I was responsible for pretty much everything 3D, whether it was the technology that we developed from 3D televisions to cameras to the content that we created. But one of the big pushes I was trying to make internally was augmented reality. And this was back in 2008. Because we had so many R&D divisions doing cool things, and they were mixing 2D in 3D and I shouldn't say they, I think the industry, because Sony wasn't doing it, but I saw other people mixing 2D and 3D in augmented reality in a very dangerous way. Meaning, have any of you seen the head-up displays in some of the higher-end automobiles where they project information on the inside of the windshield? It's absolutely the worst place you could ever put information. You're going to run over a kid chasing a ball and not even see it. You'll feel the bump, but maybe not, because the suspension's so good on your car. People have had the wrong idea about where to put this 2D information, I think, for a very long time. The information needs to be where your point of attention needs to be. And a funny anecdote when it comes to this idea of mixing 2D and 3D, we were working on a picture at Sony. It was an IMAX film, and in those days it was film IMAX, which meant that the turnaround time from us delivering content to IMAX till we actually saw it was about 5 weeks. And we had a very short schedule to make a movie, so our first order of business was a trailer. We sent the trailer out. We didn't hear. Finally, we heard back from IMAX, okay, we're ready to screen your trailer, because we needed to see it before the production and marketing executives saw it, just to make sure it was okay. So we pull into the parking lot at IMAX, and this was before the day of the Prius, so it was filled with black and gold Mercedes. And I knew something was up, and as soon as we walked in, the room was filled with all the marketing people and everybody that we were supposed to be prepared for. So we screened this trailer in the dark, and my stereographer and I were sitting there, and the lights go down, and this thing comes up, and we realized that just randomly, every third or fourth shot in this 3D trailer was 2D for some reason. Which we couldn't explain because we produced it all in 3D. And so the lights come up very slowly, too slowly, enough to hear your heart beating in your eardrums. And we're sweating bullets and figuring we're both going to get fired over this thing. And after this pregnant pause, all these executives leapt to their feet and gave it a standing ovation. Best 3D they ever saw. So then flash forward to, so we didn't break the news to anybody, but we fixed it. But then later, we were doing a project at another studio. And the executives had heard this story, and they literally sat us down and said, well, so what if we only paid to maybe do a third of the shots in 3D, and then we'll just have the other ones be 2D? Will anybody really notice? And of course, we had to tell them that yes, they would notice. But my successes in all of these kinds of experimentations have always come through skunkworks. It's never come through permission. I'm very much the seek forgiveness kind of a guy. So even at big companies like Sony, I've always fostered this idea of a skunkworks where let's not tell them what's the right thing. Let's just show it to them. You know, even if we have to break a bunch of rules to get there. So I do think 2D and 3D will coexist for a very long time.
Thank you. So Ed, the next question that I wanted to ask is because at the last, or maybe it was 2 times ago, we talked about the fact that there is no first run, second run, third run really in VR right now. There's no way to talk about it from that perspective, right? It's just VR, right? But we did speak about the fact that the 360 domes, because of 360 video, could become like a first run before you go to VR. Are you seeing anything, any new, renewed interest in that idea?
Really, I think, Bruce, the thing that we are seeing is more attention on the domes, in particular from VR producers, as a way to either to create an event. So like a release party. We did a little dome village for Dell recently, and in one of the domes they had VR headset experiences, and the dome was just the queuing area, but we had 360 projection, and we were showing scenes from the game that they were showcasing. So I think the two really go hand in hand. I mean, there's things like we have this concept that we've been shopping for it's like a sports bar on steroids with an immersive screening, right? I mean, you can take a VR feed and project it around you and then cut in some, it's like a dome casting, we call it. But anyway, I mean, I can't see somebody having a headset and eating a hot dog and drinking a beer, and it's like, what is, So I think the 360 projection onto surround screens is goes very much hand in hand, and we're certainly getting a boost from the VR boom that's happening now.
Interesting, thank you, Ed. Allison, I mean, obviously, from an artist perspective, if you've been in these dome theaters, these 360 theaters, there's such great opportunity to do many things, right? So from an AR perspective, in other words, rather than having the thought process, I'm going to wear this headset with a group of people in a room that's a dark room, so I'm going to be dark, they're going to be just somebody sitting next to me, I maybe can touch their hand, but I'm not going to see them as a person. Do you see maybe AR, in other words, where you can actually see each other, but there's additional information, and you're in a 360 dome setting? Do you see that as a potential?
Absolutely. I mean, for me personally, the attraction to AR also stems from the ability to have a shared experience. I know that we're moving in that direction, but I am really interested in, like I said, bridging those two things, and I think a dome is probably one of the best ways to have at a large scale, a shared digital experience. I think the trick with AR is that we're still a couple of years behind when it comes to the hardware. Certainly we're light years ahead in that it has a smartphone in their pockets, though you can use those for VR too. I think it'll be a while before we're really gonna see, and also from a manufacturing standpoint, that like there's enough HoloLenses that we can have a shared AR experience in a dome,
Yeah.
What hardware are you developing for right now?
A cross-platform. Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to do before we go on to this Google Cardboard question. I want to find out, and I want the audience to understand, we've heard a lot about SVOD and different opportunities for VR during this conference, but we haven't heard anything about a platform for AR yet. So I know that's something that you are working on. Can you give us a little insight into that?
Sure. So we're creating actually a CMS analytics SaaS platform. The clients that I've worked with we've seen some really great success with the campaigns that we've done, and they are wanting to start to manage that content and create that content themselves. So our goal is actually we're not focusing on the computer vision. We're going to stay stay agnostic in that, and that you can use any computer vision platform that you'd like. But ultimately, we're a CMS that will begin to integrate with your, YouTube and Vimeo and your mobile commerce and all sorts of exciting APIs there.
So if there's producers or directors in the audience that want to experiment in that, can they talk to you about working in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
Awesome. Great. All right, so now let's go to the great experiment from my perspective is Google Cardboard, because it's the democratization of VR before VR should have gotten democratized. It would be like saying that the Lumiere brothers and Cecil B. DeMille and all the people that came in the early 20s and 30s that developed the first cameras said, let's just give everybody a Kodak camera to start going around and shooting film with. That's my perspective as a student of this business. You guys, I'm sure, have another perspective, which is we've got that install base, this crazy, maybe 20 million install base of Google Cardboard worldwide now. Is Google Cardboard really VR, or is that something else? And with this question, we can answer, if you want to, talk about the fact that we're using VR as a hype word, but are we doing that to be pejorative, or are we saying, that we should really cut this up into smaller pieces and call certain things something different? So that's why I'm asking that question. Go ahead, Ed.
Being in the space since, 90, 91, there never really has been universal agreement around this. I mean, you have the reality, virtuality continuum with mixed reality, shades of mixed reality in between. But what you're talking about, Bruce, I mean, I think we do need some good language around this. I've been calling VR cinema or 360 video, you can call it. But you're using essentially a VR viewer to look around in a world. But looking around from a fixed eye point is, of course, not nearly as powerful as walking around. Right. And so the cardboard, I mean, that's the main limitation, right, is that you just really don't have agency, you can't move around in there. But you're allowing people to peer into this very cool, even if it's a 2D 360, it's very cool, and there's a novelty factor there, and it's whetting people's appetite that hopefully isn't souring them to be, but because this is just going to get more and more powerful, and so it's of course the cardboard is very much entry level, but it's still very cool, and people who see it for the first time go, oh my God,
Janie, thanks, Ed. Janie, do you see this as something that's good for an artist tool to begin to build your artist portfolio in that, and then move up to maybe the higher ranks of something that is more like Oculus, or what are your thoughts with how artists should look at this?
Yeah, it's really a mixed feeling. But when I first saw Google Cardboard, I was like, really? You're going to take it down to that? It's got to be awful.
So fast.
but so quickly. And then I saw this Volvo ad for the Volvo car, and they shot it really well, and I was in it. And the imagination does a lot when you're missing something. And I was like, this is really good. Maybe. And then, people all over the world can get a cardboard. People all over the world are not going to have a headset. So it really is, the gateway.
Yeah. On that point, I think it's interesting because it is very accessible to people, and yet what's interesting, there's so many developers out there working in VR, whatever we want to call it, who are doing 360 video. And for me, if you're going to go out and buy a Vive and do 360 video, you're cutting butter with a chainsaw. You don't need that horsepower to show a 360 video, so why not let it be that? And for me personally, from a creation standpoint, I'm an enormous fan and an adamant proponent of limitations causing great art. All possible tools available to an artist never result in better art. It's always those restrictions that give you the better art. So what we really need is people who take full advantage of, I hate to even call it a weakness, but the limitations of a Google Cardboard, and then like the Volvo thing, you're transformed, and then again, that's the gateway to the bigger thing.
And yeah, it's a difference of people when you say virtual reality and they've never seen it, They just can't imagine what it's like. And when they see it in that, they now have a point of reference of what that means. I mean, it would be nice if the field of view were wider, and the Gear VR is a much better experience, but you can't deny that people all over the world can see VR because of it. It's a great invention.
Thank you, Janie. Buzz.
Well, I mean, Google already is kind of moving beyond cardboard, so they're already working on a competitor to Gear VR, and for Samsung. But to me, the big aha for cardboard is that it essentially allowed New York Times to get in the business, and then once New York Times got in the business, then every media company in the world, from CNN to Condé Nast to Variety, all of a sudden they needed a virtual reality department, and then those guys need to think about how they're going to outdo each other. And so clearly, 9 out of 10 of these applications will probably not great, but one of them will be great, and then they'll try to outdo each other. So it's a stepping stone.
So Matt, you're a marketer. You've been doing the couching for consumer and also for B2B for a long time. Tell me, how do you couch Google Cardboard right now to the consumer? And then how do you talk to the people that are funding multi-millions of dollars to these, corporations? I mean, Jaunt just closed, what, $100 to $150 million? How do you tell Jaunt you're going to shoot on Jaunt and it's going to go to Google Cardboard? I mean, how do you tell those investors? So the two sides, how do you make that differential?
I mean, Jaunt to me is I don't know Jaunt per se, but they're really not all that different from the Netflix business, right? So they need to create a lot of content and have a lot of different eyeballs, so they can create enough traction so that ultimately they can do subscription. And to me, there's not a huge difference from like the rectangularism of the displays we have right now. Like, I can watch Netflix on a big screen TV, I can watch it on a mobile phone, and VR needs to get that kind of scale. And clearly, like, all day long I want to be in the Vive. All day long I never crave the cardboard. So I don't particularly think the cardboard's a great solution. I don't think it's particularly great for VR. However, to your point, in order for this thing to get sparked and get started, it needs volume. It needs to just get in people's hands, and they try the cardboard, they like it a little bit. Then when they go and get a Samsung phone and Gear comes free with that, then they move up to that, and they go to a friend's house and they try Vive and they start talking about it. And a lot of this stuff from the marketing perspective, I think we're kind of overthinking and overcomplicating it. I mean, I think some of the experiences that we want to have is we want to create experiences so that young people can start becoming YouTube stars in VR and projecting that out for non-VR people. If I'm doing something super cool in VR and then have my own Twitch or YouTube channel, and all of my users don't have VR, but they're just watching me do crazy stuff in VR, that's a huge win.
So are we at the beginning of like the video game business before they put all the different, the ways in which they tell you that this is only good for teenagers, or this is, in other words, instead of saying those kind of things, you say this is good for, cardboard, this is good for,
right,
Gear
right.
VR.
So like when you look at a video game ad, it's got like a little Nintendo icon.
Exactly.
I hope not. I mean, I really hope not. I mean, clearly you'll make experiences for the Vive that will, totally just not work for cardboard. I mean, to answer your question, is likely that's what's going to happen, but I think.
So as a group, are we thinking that, okay, we're just going to go ahead and let Google Cardboard say it's VR just to get the ball rolling here, and then let it work itself out? Is that what you're saying, Janie?
Well, first of all, Google Cardboard already is called Google Cardboard, and people call it that. They say cardboard, they say Google Cardboard. So it's already differentiated in that way. But the idea, two points, would be when I make cinematic content, because I'm not doing the other kind, even though I love it, I publish to all the platforms. I want to publish video to the Vive because people can buy it on Steam, and so publish to all these platforms. Also, there's a lot of creative people all around the world, in Africa, in India, in all these places, all over the world, that don't have access to, this kind of technology. And once they see that VR, they have the ability. So it allows them this inclusive world that we all dream about and talk about, but it's really important.
Yeah, I don't see much of a problem. I mean, the fact that you're calling it cardboard is not setting a high expectation. You know what I'm saying?
So let's go on. I mean, if that's considered low tech, let's talk about what new tech, right? Because I think that in some ways, you know, we saw the launch of the HMDs at the beginning of the year. We were having some different kinds of expectations of things. But now I really want to focus on new tech. And I want to start with Allison because, again, I feel like I'm going back to my roots of, you know, in journalism many, many years ago. You know, you give equal time, and I feel like we haven't given equal time to AR for a very long time, especially here at Digital Hollywood, because it's been very VR oriented. So let's start with you and let's talk about what new technologies, what new ways of working in AR are bringing agency, that ability to be, you know, have a different kind of presence in the reality that you're in, that will be wow factor, one, and then two, enhance one's lifestyle or experience.
I think, I mean, one of the kind of first places to start is when we actually are wearing devices that are reasonable every day on our face. And I say that because, again, I'm a huge fan of HoloLens and would love to play with Magic Leap and all of those things. But again, that's a big piece of hardware. I'm not going to be walking around with it. So when it's in my Warby Parkers, I think that'll be a huge game changer. But currently, one of the things that I'm most excited about, right now, most of the work that we do is marker-based, which means, and that marker is both, you know, can be something that looks like that. It can be, I do a lot of stuff on wearables and object recognition, and all of that's wonderful. But I think that when I'm able to quickly, and it's happening, but you know, it isn't just for the prosumer, but I can actually have a mesh of a physical space and begin to map AR that isn't marker-based, meaning the experience doesn't break when I stop looking at that object. I think, and that's starting, I think that'll really be pushing us forward. And I think we'll start to see that like VR and AR at that point really start to converge.
Awesome, thank you. Buzz, you've seen so much technology happen so quickly in the last 10 years. Certainly you're looking at, you know, all of these, from the theatrical perspective, you know, we have all this new high dynamic range, as I said before, and the different things that are going on with regards to the way that filmmakers are looking at things. But what is it that you're getting excited about that you're seeing from the consumer side, you know, that looks like it would be something that would be adopted and that filmmakers would then want to make something for that?
Well, to that point, and this I think goes maybe even back to what's changed since last year as well, is access to tools is unprecedented these days. It's amazing how much access anybody has to create this stuff. You look at the number of 3D rigs you can get to put a bunch of GoPros together and have your own 360 rig. All of a sudden, that's really transformed the entire game. And then it just becomes a quality issue. My own personal passions these days have a lot to do with fidelity. You know, I've worked, I started out as the director of engineering at Lucasfilm, THX, and my job there really was to bring fidelity to the movie experience, which added another dimension to a 2D environment. And I think now we have some really amazing technologies that allow us to do that. I think audio is still pretty far behind the curve in VR, no matter, I mean, no offense to anybody who's playing with binaural audio, but you can't really get it more than 3 inches away from your face at this point, and that's a problem. And they're solvable problems, it's just nobody's focusing on it. But I think that some of the tech that's out there now is really, it's more up to a refinement issue than it is anything else. But the funny thing is, and I learned this very important lesson working at Lucasfilm, was the technology should never be in front of the content. So the content should drive the need as opposed to the other way around. And I think we're still trying to service certain needs, but we don't really even know what they are. I mean, much like when 3D first started, people would ask me, what's the best 3D you've ever seen? And literally for 3 years I said, I haven't seen it yet. Even though I was the guy responsible for it. My name was on a ton of it. And then I finally saw it. It was Pina, by the way, Vin Vendors. Anyway. I think the same with VR and AR experiences. Haven't seen it yet. I see the potential of it, huge potential, but I think we've got a little bit of, chicken and egg gets overused, but this idea that one is going to slowly, incrementally adjust the other one to the point where we now have what we need. And we have so much great technology out there now that I think we're ready for the content to start pushing the technology development as opposed to the other way around.
Janie?
Agency. That's a question?
Yes.
I recently saw a really amazing experience where it was done with photogrammetry, where you could walk all over and explore a place and in the vibe, and it was just wonderful. I felt like I was there, and I think what brings it is when you can have your hands in it in a fluid, natural way, like that toy box demo that a few of us saw, where there's weight. And I've been in some experiences where I'm holding a physical object, I was in a torch experience, a cave experience, and I had a torch, but they gave you a real weighted stick, and then you're in the experience, and it felt more like I was really there. And then the other thing I saw recently was I was in an experience, and I was in it with another friend, and I could see them, their full avatar, so we could both see each other and go through this experience together, and that was that brought that. Also for like medical, for different, other than entertainment, you know, when you've got the ability to use a tactile and use your hands to do things, it's huge, and there's so many different ways to use VR other than what we all kind of talk about a lot, which is, you know, entertainment and you know, experiences in the vibe, but there's a lot of different ways that VR is being used, and agencies being able to do things, and it is very, very important.
Thank you, Janie and Buzz. Ed, I want to couch this first a little bit because it's the same question, but you were the co-chair for the SIGGRAPH VR Village. And there was a lot of experimentation that was going on there. We got to see a lot of different things. Of what you seen there and what you're hearing about coming, you know, up, I'm not sure, are you doing, I didn't get a chance to ask you, are you doing SIGGRAPH again, the same thing?
Yeah, I'm not chairing it this year. That was a lot of work.
Right.
But Denise Quinnell, who was my co-chair last year, is doing the VR Village, and
Great.
I believe it's planned for LA again the year in 2017 as well.
Awesome, great. So the question is, back to that was, what did you see that had, you know, interesting uses of agency, of being immersed?
Sure. Well, I think Joni had mentioned I'm not sure if we're talking about the same experience. The one, it's a group called Art NM, and we had an 11 by 11 meter nomadic VR arena that we set up with cameras and all. So we could do full untethered nomadic, you know, experiences. And that one experience with the torch, you're in an Egyptian cave, you have an avatar, there's trackers on your hands and feet, and you walk up to the walls of the cave and you can see the hieroglyphs, and you look down into the sarcophagus and you see a golden mask mummy with the reflection of your avatar's face in it. But having another person in there with you was the most amazing thing. And I remember taking my avatar hand, and I was in there with Joan Collins, computer graphics pioneer, right? She's crazy. And I reached out my avatar hand and I touched her avatar face, but I felt her real flesh. And something just clicked in my brain, and I'm like, oh my God, this is real. And the next thing I did was I tried to lean on the sarcophagus, and it wasn't. This really points to experiences like The Void, which is, you know, you guys, if you haven't seen that, that's very cool. And they're demoing it now, but it's a themed attraction, out-of-home attraction.
Where is it?
Yeah, it's Provo or something up in Utah. Yeah, but they'll be putting those. That's the first one's going to be there. But you know, in the domes, I mean, what we're doing in the domes is technically known as spatial augmented reality, where instead of wearing headgear, which can be cumbersome depending on what you're trying to do, you project onto the world around you. And in that case, there are a lot of things you can do to get agency. Number one, it's like a tour bus through VR, and the bus driver can grab a joystick and fly you through a model of the known universe, which they do in the planetariums. So like that, you could have dancers dancing and fire coming out of their hands up onto the dome, or you can be the fire avatar and cast, you know, balls of fire around and stuff like that. You know, you still can do some agency.
Just that you
Also,
wanted to add something?
voice recognition in VR, being able to talk command, gaze recognition getting better and better, being able to interact with the environment in these more fluent ways.
Matt, was there anything, thanks Jenny and Ed, was there anything during the time that you were involved directly with the gaming group that you were seeing that they were pushing the envelope with some things that have to do with agency?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's the agency is one aspect of it. I think there's agency, immersion, avatar embodiment, so you actually physically feel like your whole body is there. Shared space, like all of these things kind of create, much agency to me is just that you're there, that you physically are there. But if you're not involved and engaged in kind of an active, visceral way, then it's kind of half of the battle. I think some of the coolest stuff that I've seen is getting some of the really competitive high-end esports guys into Vive and seeing them just totally freak out. Like they're super competitive, they're super active, and when these guys get together and have a shared space and either compete against each other or with each other, like light bulbs click. Because I've been interested in esports for a while, but I didn't get it. Like people would just sit there and play video games, just sitting there, and you'd watch them just sitting there. I'm like, well, what's the big thrill? But to see these guys like actually compete and do all kinds of crazy moves with their whole body, you start to see that esports plus active virtual reality, likely with things like Twitch and YouTube, then you start to see like, oh my God, these are three individual bubbles that have been living on their own. And when you kind of create this Venn diagram, we're going to be onto something. And people like Turner are starting to do esports networks. I think that this is a big area for me that I think is a hot area to watch.
Before I go to a piece from Randall, I just wanted to check in with you once again, Allison, with regards to, is there anything in the AR world that we should be looking forward to that goes beyond, obviously HoloLens started off at a 40-degree, ability, lots of proscenium in that. But do we think that the ability for us to be able to even just be present in a much wider frame is going to be available?
Yeah. I've had the opportunity to try some really amazing things that are coming out. I can't say anything else.
Of course.
Yeah. But
yeah. We're asking the question about should we be looking forward to?
Yeah, I think certainly. I think that AR is going to become far more cinematic. I think that especially, the phone processor can only handle so much. So I think one of the great things is with all of these new headsets coming out, like AR is getting far more cinematic, far more engaging. I think we're not having to, pull frames out and do things like that. So I think in the next 6 to 12 months, AR is going to look very, very different than it does today.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so before we kind of wrap everything up here and ask some questions to the audience, I just want to make sure that we hear from Randall with regards to.
Our pilot is a Boston shot with two GoPros with 250-degree lenses in opposite directions. And when we shot it, we didn't know how close the actors could get to the screen, to the camera. We were told they had to be a certain distance away, and I wanted to have the wheelchair surrounded with them, and so I didn't do that. I put them in the front. We couldn't do any tests. And so I learned that you can put them around. You don't have to have them so far away, but I didn't have that. And then when we moved on to the 11 episodes we shot to finish the series, we worked with the Nokia Ozo, the prototype of it. And then the challenge was, how do you shoot in stereo? How close can you get without having the audience's eyes have to, cross to see things? And we learned a lot about what not to do there. Once again, no tests. But now in post, we're trying to fix some of the problems that we created, not knowing how close we could get. There's a lot of rotoscoping involved with the stitching, and it's, and the mix. The mix was like a crazy thing because we're working with a 16:9 image on the screen, and we have to realize that when you're panning the sounds, they're supposed to be over here, and you're seeing them over there, so you have to interpret where things are. I mean, there's got to be in the future a virtual reality sound place where the screen actually goes around you and you can clearly see where the sounds are coming, because it was very difficult to interpolate, see it there and hear it there and say, oh, that's right, things like that.
So as we can tell, what's interesting is that Randall brings up the challenges of, in some ways, where we've been and where we're going. Randall brings up the challenges to the filmmaker with regards to that there's technological challenges that have to do with not just sight but sound as well. And obviously, we were able to get this piece from him just before he left. So the other challenges are just, how do you do this, have budget to be able to do these things and all of the things that go with it. So there's a lot, weighing on our world right now. So I just want to go through each of the panel members. I'll start with you, Buzz, and we'll finish down at the other end, sorry, with Allison. And, so the question is, just based on what Randall had to say and the challenges he has, what do you think the major challenges are for right now?
Yeah.
What do you see? I don't think 5 year is too far for us to look out. Let's just say the next time we meet, which is going to be in October,
yeah.
What can we see getting done before October? And what are the challenges that are still going to be there, at that point?
Sure. Well, one of it I'm hoping happens by then, this isn't by no way a prediction, but hopefully maybe just some advice, is we've been doing visual effects for very many years, and there's a lot of incredibly talented people out there who really understand the nature of how to make objects feel like they're part of a world. And I see a lot of reinvention going on that's kind of unnecessary. People are spending an awful lot of money trying to figure out, for example, stitching. How many companies out there are solving stitching? I mean, come on. That should not be what your company is about. I think that what you need to be about is telling amazing stories and then find the people that know how to fix these, because there's tons of very talented people out there who already know this. It might be a different context, but it's certainly very relevant. So I think between now and the fall, there's also some dust settling that's happening right now, I think, largely due to the fact that the Oculus didn't really ship on time, and even though there were some advanced notices and that kind of thing, and who knows, maybe the next better thing will rise above. Who knows? So I think what we're really going to see between now and then is just a dust settling and people starting to figure out where certain baby steps in traction are happening, but we still don't even know. I hear people building digital marketplaces for VR content, and yet it's like building a Best Buy but not having any products on the shelves. What are we doing building stores when we don't have the content yet? So I do think it's a level setting and people readjusting their priorities into making great content and hopefully utilizing people who know how to do this.
Awesome. Janie?
I don't know about by October, but I'm really looking forward to very high resolution screens. And I think it's closer than we all think it is. And so that it's like the air. So it's just like you're right there.
Okay. Ed?
The mind reels.
Yeah.
I think content also. I mean, really, there's, the technology is now moving forward, and I think higher resolution screens, better distribution platforms, the whole thing needs to get streamlined in the whole workflow. But I'm really interested to see what happens. Cinematic language, if you will, develops both for interactive game type experiences and all, and there's a lot of really brilliant and creative people out there, and I just can't wait to see what people come up with.
Awesome. Matt?
I mean, I would like to see like a group come together called like the Naysayer Police. Because I get really worried that like there's all these people that are going to come up with all these ideas to say that VR stinks and it's overhyped and the bubble's going to burp, the bubble's going to burp. But like, I was, just before I came here, I was looking at the Voices to VR podcast, which is an awesome podcast that looked at all the really interesting things happening in VR, and I looked at the last like 10 episodes. And they talked to the guy that's there doing Minecraft. He talked to a guy that's fixing Lazy Eye. He talked to another guy that's starting a non-for-profit to get into medicine and education. And there's someone else that wants to challenge Chrome and Google to be the OS. And so there's all these amazing, cool things. And I just hope that like we let like these little gems of things grow. as opposed to trying to, kill VR before it gets a chance to start.
So do you want to be the police commissioner of this?
Hell yeah! I don't care about that around. No one would really take me that seriously, but I would like to.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Awesome. Allison.
I mean, I'm also going to have to, for AR, it's definitely content. I think in the AR world, we have a little bit of digging to do from, often people are like, oh, so QR codes. And I'm like, oh.
Please no.
I swear I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm just trying to tell a story. So I think in the next 6 months, I hope that the focus is on really telling stories with AR and digging out a little bit from a not so pleasant past.
There's only one other thing I want to add. You and I had a conversation, Allison. I want to just add this because for those of you who do want to work in AR, even in VR, brands today, are pushing our business, and they seem to have settled on. I don't even know what the name of the font is. Maybe Janie, you can tell me what the font is. But when you look at Walmart and you look at the variety of the big box stores and the large retailers, they've basically all their fonts look the same. Helvetica. Okay, thank you. So I'm not a font guy. I apologize.
Great documentary.
Right? But what I want to say is, what did you tell me when we spoke about the fact that everybody thinks QR codes, but what is the one thing that you think that people should be thinking about for their brands with regards to their logos? Okay, I'll stop. We had a conversation about the fact that the logo, if they create their own identifying logo, that becomes a way for them to be able to create.
That becomes their distribution channel, right?
Exactly.
So what's amazing, what I'm most excited about AR is that the products themselves become the distribution channel. I can update digital content to this, and this this is where I go to get the content that I love.
Interesting.
This is how you, as a brand, you start to say, this coffee cup has more value to me because this digital content exists here, and I expect it to be updated, and I have a relationship with it. So I think that if brands, the challenge that I have and that I talk to them a lot is let's take ownership of your product and let's tell the story through that. Let's use that as the way to distribute your digital content, because that's the most powerful place to have it. And I love the idea of having this digital and physical world really existing as one. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, panel. Questions? Sir.
What kind of lessons did VR companies learn from the Google Glass failure in terms of wearables catching on?
Okay, so the question is, what did the industry learn based on the Google Glass failure? How are we catching on to that?
Well, Google Glass was just a little, display kind of floating above your field of view, so it wasn't really AR overlay onto the environment. The thing I remember is how sort of scathing people got towards people wearing the Google Glass, It's there were a lot of jokes and like that.
Glass hole, does everybody know that term?
Yeah, glass hole, right.
I mean, I think one of the things that I kept hearing when we were talking about Google Cardboard is that it's an education tool. We're in still a period of education where we have to empower people to be excited and make the barrier to entry low enough for AR and for VR. And so when Google Glass rolled out, there was no education. It was kind of this sci-fi, poorly designed UI, poorly designed kind of experience for everyone all around. So immediately it was we don't want it. And I think, I think Google has kind of gone, they've pushed it kind of underground and are revamping it. And they'll roll out, I think, a number of products that will guide and I think every company should do this, that should be guiding the consumer to that final experience, just like Google Cardboard is doing.
And I'd like to make a brief comment on that too. I think the best thing that happened with Google Glass is it made people cautious about these new technologies, that it's not unicorns pooping ice cream. This is a real thing, and it needs to have real impact, and we need to have a real need for it. So we're going to take a critical look at these new technologies when they come out, and not just go, oh, look, another $900 thing that I don't know what it does yet. So I think in a good way, it made us critical of some of this stuff to make the products better before they hit the mass market.
It's almost like the Apple Newton when that came out.
Exactly.
Sir. In the front here.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Havelica.
Just to make sure that that's you. I can recall at least of 2 waves of push for VR that is not quite naked. I know that the technology is making for a push, but what have we learned from those times when we didn't make it? And what has changed at this time? Do you think that VR and AR is going to make?
Okay, so the question is, there's been an evolution that's been going on. We've actually had 2 times where VR has tried to become something, and AR has tried to become something. And what is it that's changed now? What do we have now that's allowed us to say that there can be a success? Janie?
VR, it's astonishing now this time because your whole body feels like you're there. And it's on fire. I mean, just in every sector, and it wasn't like this before. And I mean, when I put on a Vive and I'm in that world, it's so much fun. I mean, I know there's a lot of really utilitarian uses for it, and there's going to be a lot of across everywhere I can think of, but it's just it's undeniable that it's new, that this time it's for real.
But I'd steal some of my thinking from probably seeing too many Ted Schilowitz talks. But Ted talks about how we're augmented humans because of our mobile phones. Like we are addicted to our phones, whether we're checking maps, whether we're texting, whether we're just everything we do. I mean, if you leave your phone at home, you feel vulnerable. And so I think, while the technology, we can clearly talk about how the display technology is better and the head mount, the GPU processing, blah, 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 blah. But I think as human beings, we're ready for this kind of connectivity to a device. And it's VR, some people say evolutionary. I think it potentially could be revolutionary. But I think that mobile technology has kind of stepped us forward.
Yeah. Time for one more question over here.
Hey.
My question is, how much do you see industry as a driver for AR, and do you see educational on-ramp happening in secondary schools, high schools, or colleges to bring people into that space?
Okay, so the question is, with regards to AR, not VR, you're not asking? No, AR. With regards to AR, do we see an opportunity or a future where secondary schools and education will be used as an on-ramp to get people involved in this? Let's start down with you, Allison.
I hope so. I think I think any good school should be offering, coding as your language course. I think that, teaching how to be a VR and AR designer should be courses. What's amazing is we're moving into a space where digital information is going to be at the body scale. So we have to start thinking differently, like architects and interior designers. We have to start thinking about digital content at our body scale. If you watch someone right now use AR, they're going like this because they want to zoom in or zoom out, and we've totally forgotten to use our bodies to actually move closer to the object to see it more closely, right? So I think the best place to explore those things is in the classroom, right? It's studio and it's play. So I hope, if anybody,
And Ed, the question was asked to you. You have a thought on this?
Oh, well, I'm probably not qualified to answer, but I have noticed, they're giving tablets away to kids in the schools, and that's a first step in that direction, I think. And also, the domes, there's hundreds and hundreds of domes in school districts that have converted to digital. So you have this immersive visualization environment available in the classrooms as well.
Well, thank you to everyone out there who's watching. Thank you to everybody here who stayed with us. And obviously, thank you to this wonderful panel.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it.
Good one.